Hey guys, welcome to Wine and Witchcraft in June. So we have the one and only Miss Thorn Mooney with us
Hello.
tonight. So we're super excited. My hair's doing some weird thing over here. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so welcome, Miss Thorn.
Hi. I'm very excited to be here. I have been watching y'all on YouTube, and apparently I completely forgot this, actually doing things with you on YouTube for like 10 years, 15 years, I don't know, a long
Yeah.
ass number of years. So it's nice.
Yeah.
It's so funny, like when you say to someone, like, "Oh, we go way back." No, that's literally true. Like we go way back.
And without even really like being intentional about it. Like
Right.
YouTube, it's this weird sort of like, it's like this petri dish place where you're all in this space and you don't think about how your community is there, like you don't appreciate what
Yeah.
you have. And then you circle back and you find people and you're like, wait a second, we've actually just like been in each other's lives for years.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
I
like,
don't
what
know.
is that thing called? 5 Degrees from Bruce Willis or
Bacon.
something? What is that thing called?
Kevin, it's
Kevin
6
Bacon.
degrees.
There we
Kevin
go.
Bacon. Oh yeah.
There we go.
Feel strongly about this. Anyway.
Yeah, but basically that's what I meant.
I just don't understand how the same guy who was like violent and terrible in Hollow Man is also the voice of Balto. Like, how did that happen?
I don't know, but it's all I found with Kevin Bacon is him being naked at the end of what's the name of that movie with Nev Campbell? Or is it Hollow Man? Is it Hollow Man where he's naked?
He's naked in Holland, but Nev Campbell isn't in that blissfully.
Blissfully, yeah. That's Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's Footloose, right? So Balto and
Yes.
Hollow Man are the same person, and this is a problem for me. And we're all 6 degrees away from him. Welcome
Apparently
to the show, everybody. Welcome.
This whole show is about Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon comes up on like every podcast I'm a part of. I don't know how this happens to me, but it's true.
Yeah.
I've already had to put people on timeout already. Wow, this is an early start to the show.
Right, Wild Things. But Kevin Bacon isn't in Wild Things, right? Kevin Bacon's not in Wild Things.
I mean, his last name is
Nev Campbell is naked in Wild Things. Right? Am I remembering the 90s right, everybody?
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon's in Wild Things, isn't he?
So how about them witchcrafts, everybody?
Witchcraft, what's that? What is everybody drinking?
All right, I am drinking. This is too funny.
Oh God.
I'm drinking Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, Thorn. Just, I can't.
Like, on purpose? Why?
So what had happened was I didn't have any wine, and I sent my husband to Publix to get some wine, and he came back with Calais Rosé.
Okay, I also went to Publix. So where I live, we don't have a Publix, but I'm visiting family in Alabama. I'm in Huntsville currently, and I went to Publix, and they have an excellent wine selection for a grocery store. And so your husband has failed you. I picked up a bottle of Casillero del Diablo. I'm sorry. I studied Chinese in school and a little bit of French. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry, but it's a cab and I'm really excited about it because it's from Chile. I'm always excited about Cabernets, but I tend to not like Californian Cabernets, which is like all of them, right? So do I really like Cabernet? Probably not, but I like that.
Probably not. I'm drinking Pinot Grigio from the Winking Owl, which is from a shitty store called Aldi, which I absolutely love. $2.97 right here. So definitely, there's definitely carcinogens in this.
Why is it that Thorn is the only one who's drinking like a normal bottle of wine. I'm drinking
because she is intelligent and she's an accomplished woman, and we're trash. That's why.
I'm definitely trash too, everybody. I have a WASP background, and we're really good at just sort of like putting forward that veneer of like normal, marketable, trustworthy adult. I can blend in at like a mid-tier restaurant. It's okay, but it's not who I am on the inside.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
So
that's
as always, we are sponsored by Bloodbath Products, and this was my month to try out one of their products. And I tried out the Morbid Moisture Body Lotion in Gravedigger. So this is what it looks like. The ingredients are listed on it. And the great thing about it is it's all natural ingredients. I mean, you get calendula in here, all sorts of cool ass shit in here. It's not like, poured full of chemicals. It's really, really good stuff. And I love their imagery. But I got a really, 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 really bad sunburn. I mean, like so bad I had blisters all over my face. This was what, last week, Justin? Yeah, it was like a week ago.
Yes. Because you went to the beach and didn't wear sunscreen.
Yeah, I went to the beach and I fell asleep on the beach and didn't wear any sunscreen. So I had blisters all over my body. I had them all over my face. It was a bad situation. So once I was completely done with the sunburn and my skin began to peel, like I'm not even making this up, this shit was my saving grace. Like I would get out of the shower, lather this shit all over my body, and I didn't itch. I didn't peel. Like this stuff is amazing. So as you guys know, we have a code, WAW15. Will get you 15% off of your complete order at bloodbathproducts.com. So go try them out. I love all their products, especially their incense, but I tried out their Morbid Moisturizer, and it was so, so good. So great things to say about Bloodbath, as you guys know.
Oh, gosh, these comments are hilarious. Let's see. Cool. Anytime you have an open discussion about the shower scene from Wild Things, it's a good night. Yes, ma'am. Happy Pride Month. It is Pride Month, which is Lily Pod. Mm-hmm. Happy Pride to everybody. Oh my gosh, so many comments.
I know. You guys
okay, so I know. So tonight we are talking about eclecticism, I guess, was like the main topic of the evening. And it's really interesting because, Brittany and I are both eclectic in our past. But Thorn, I believe you are Wiccan, correct? You identify as Wiccan.
Mm-hmm. So I'm a Gardnerian Wiccan. So I'm one of those asshole traditionalist people.
So we're going to end the show. No, I'm kidding. I know, I'm kidding.
You both are wrong.
You both are wrong. Oh my God, it's storming. So I mean, Brittany and I were talking about this a little bit before you came in. Is like, I haven't actually spoken to anybody in a long time who's actually Wiccan. Like people say that they are, but they aren't actually Wiccan. Why? I guess it's just a blunt question. Like, why?
Why?
Why in the sense of like so many people are like eclectic and just kind of like pull from wherever. What has like kept you on your own path? What has kept you there?
Well, I'm going to get fired for a second here. So I think that part of the problem, if it's a problem, and maybe it's not, part of the reason the conversation gets a little bit wonky is because I don't think we really appreciate how broad the term eclectic really is. And I mean, if eclecticism, just at its face value, is looking at lots of different sources, pulling from multiple things, experimenting, expanding upon what works, throwing out what doesn't, building upon it. I mean, that's what I do as a member of a tradition. So I would make the argument that witchcraft inherently is an eclectic realm to exist in. And I think that having the perspective that no, like, here's my box and I stay in this box and that's the only thing that I'm ever going to do. Like, I don't know that anybody actually occupies that space. Like, even if we do identify with particular labels or traditions, etc., like, I don't think I've ever met a witch who's like, well, no, I'm only going to do this one thing and I'm not going to do anything else. And this is what I call myself. And everything else is, it doesn't work or it's wrong or it's not for me. I'm only going to do like, people don't do that. I mean, even people who have initiations or they run covens or whatever, like, so I think on some level we're all eclectic, everybody.
Oh my God, people are not going to like that. But I agree with you 100%.
I think we also have a lot of people, I'm not going to mention any names.
If you do, you'll get more views. I'm sorry, don't do this. Gossip is bad. Stop.
That don't know the meaning of what eclectic is, and so they denounce eclecticism, but they themselves talk about on the YouTube channels about how they pull from all these different areas, but they say they're not eclectic.
I think it's because there's a stigma attached to that. And I think probably initiatory Wiccan traditions are probably largely responsible for some of that stigma in particularly like the 90s. I think I'm sure prior to that, but I think the 90s stick out in my head because that's when I was learning about witchcraft. And there were a lot of very vocal folks in online spaces in particular who would tell you that if you weren't a member of a coven, if you weren't an initiate, then you weren't really Wiccan, you weren't really a witch, et cetera, et cetera. And people adopted the word eclectic almost as a way of pushing back against that. So it was kind of already like either or. So it's not that people necessarily called themselves eclectic because other folks weren't doing eclecticism. It's because they wanted to create a space where they were very consciously pushing against folks who seemed to be telling them that they weren't allowed to be there. Myself included. I mean, I had the Silver Ravenwolf teen witch kid, everybody. Like, I'm who everybody was afraid of in the 90s. Like, ooh, here to ruin the tradition, right? But that's what people said in the 80s and 90s. Like, all these young people reading their Scott Cunningham, like, they're diluting it. Like, remember it? That's the word that people would use.
Yeah.
They're diluting it.
Got so much flack because she was too fluff bunny. That was the thing. The fluff bunny word was thrown around even like 15 years ago when we were on YouTube together. The whole fluff bunny thing became a thing. Like, people were calling people out for being fluff bunnies, and I for the longest time I couldn't understand that. I'm like, I don't get it.
Well, and the meaning of that term changed because, like, when that term, like, kind of the earliest that I can point to, it was used by initiatory Wiccans basically to refer to everybody else.
Yes.
Like, you're fluffy if you're not an initiate. Right. But now being fluffy means, well, you're not serious enough. Right. So, like, even the meanings of our insults have shifted, and the meaning of eclectic and eclecticism has shifted. And in the 90s, I feel like people were really working hard to claim it as a word that was empowering. I remember there was this period in witchcraft publishing where there was always a chapter where it was like types of witches, right? And it would say something like, well, Gardnerians trace their lineage to Gerald Gardner. Alexandrians are just like Gardnerians, but they're more ceremonial, like whatever that even means. And then like it would be like Picta Witta, and people would be like, what is that? Right. And then there would be eclectic witches. And it would say something about how eclectic witches pull from all these sources and nobody tells them what to do because they're so creative. And it was clearly about trying to empower readers because that's who was buying these books, people who identified as eclectic. And now I think we're back to people using it as an insult.
It is. And like September Crow was saying, folks have narrowed fluff bunny to a newbie or less harsh, or baby witch is the new term for newbie, baby witch.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, like
I do feel like, 10 years ago or more, I mean, I felt like when I first came into witchcraft or, Wicca, especially coming into YouTube, I always thought that at the time that you're either Wiccan, like you follow a tradition, or you're not real. Like that's always the way that I felt. And the structure didn't resonate with me. But I do feel like there's definitely a swap nowadays where, to me, and things that I've seen, it's like people push back against any sort of tradition, whether you're initiated or not, because I think people so much now want to go against structure. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, but like any sort of specific organization is bad.
Because it goes back to you start thinking about organized religion. And for me, you know, the whole draw to witchcraft in general was the fact that it wasn't organized. It was not organized religion. Because organized religion left a bad taste in my mouth. I liked the eclecticism of it. I liked to be able to pull from different cultures and different traditions and create my own tradition, as it were, you know, my own path. That was something that drew me to it. And I remember, Justin, when you and I first, you know, found paganism as an umbrella term, we thought like, okay, so if we're into witchcraft, we must be Wiccan, right? So we started saying like, okay, we're going to go down this Wiccan path. And then we hit this wall like, okay, wait a minute, hold on. Maybe this isn't where we're supposed to be. Wait, hold on. And we had to backtrain and think like, okay, this is a serious thing. Like, let's step back here and actually like think about this, because, you know, growing up in high school and stuff like that, the goth people, you know, that's where the Wicca thing was thrown into. Goth people and Wicca was like a thing. It was like a fashion thing at the same time. So we thought it was cool. And then you go into it, you go, wait, no, this is like a serious spirituality thing. Like, we need to back away and really look at this from an outside perspective, you know, and walk down that path in a different light. Because when I started walking towards it, I'm like, wait a minute, all these rules and this structure, this organization, like, this is not my thing. I think I want to go this way.
I think that people have this idea that being part of a religion, a tradition, necessarily is about confinement. Like, here's your list of rules. Like, be sure you check them all. Otherwise, you're not really one of us. And like, that comes from a place. Like, lots of folks have wounds surrounding, you know, the religions that they were raised in. And for the majority of folks, that's some variation on Christianity. And I think when I say that it's a mistake to carry that stuff over, it's not that I think people are doing that intentionally. It's not like you can just consciously put down trauma, okay? But it is, I think it's a shame to conflate all religiosity or all tradition with that particular authoritarian form, you know? Like, so, like, my particular tradition has a liturgy, has a ritual system. Like, we have a way of doing things that works for us. And so we do it. And there is a repetitive nature to that. But the idea that we don't do anything else, or we're not creative, or we can't write our own rituals, like, that stuff isn't true. Or like, well, we have coven leaders, we have a hierarchy, therefore everybody's being controlled. Right? Like, no, that's not how it works, like in a healthy system. But I think people don't have healthy models for tradition and for religiosity. And that's why we kind of fall back. And you see like these wider trends in our communities. And I don't even just mean pagan communities, but I mean like American communities in particular. You see, well, I'm spiritual but not religious. It's not just not just witches who are saying that. I mean, Christians say that too, right? Like there are scholars who explicitly study this particular movement of people, right? The nuns, people who don't identify with particular traditions, but they still describe themselves as spiritual. And what I think folks don't appreciate is there are patterns amongst those things. So at what point are you really being eclectic? Right? Like, you can tell other folks that your Christianity is non-denominational, but everybody knows like non-denominational is code for evangelical, right? Like in most, right? Like, you still behave as though you're a denomination.
Correct.
So like, if I tell you,
comes with an inclination.
Yeah, if I tell you, well, I don't follow a tradition, I'm an eclectic witch. Well, that by itself makes you part of a wider movement of people. So, you know, and I know that doesn't erase our individuality.
No, I agreed. And I think for me, I'm definitely someone who suffers from that religious trauma growing up Christian and being a part of the alphabet mafia, a lot of that trauma, infiltrates different parts of my life. But I mean, just having conversations with Brittany and other people in the community, it's like, I never resonated with Wicca, but, you've talked about this in a video too. There are still parts of Wicca as like, I guess, a tradition or a structure as a whole that still do set up my process and how I do magic and how I do ritual and how I am, I would even say religiously. And as far as like the duality of male and female, which I didn't really realize in my own practice for a long time. But I think it is this kind of thought of that continual fight against the establishment, any establishment that represents oppression, even if it really doesn't. Does that, you know what I mean? It's triggering in some ways, but I do think that it blocks you from progressing further and investigating certain things more deeply because of your trauma.
Well, even if you're not in a space where you can accept that that's something that you can reevaluate yourself, I think where we really do each other and ourselves a disservice is when we write off other people. Like if I tell you that I'm a Wiccan, I'm an initiate, I'm part of a tradition, one thing that's been happening in really recent years is people assume it's very trendy right now to say that, like, particularly Gardnerian Wiccans, like, we're all being duped into some kind of cult, right? Like, we're all, right? Like Gerald Gardner was a misogynist, and like, if
haven't heard that.
If you're a Gardnerian priestess, it's because like you're being manipulated. I hear stuff like this all the time, and that's other people's stuff, right? That they're projecting onto me. And I think that's the problem. Like, if you hear the word eclectic and you think, ooh, that person is an idiot, or that person has no commitment, or that person isn't serious, like, that's a judgment that you're making, and that says something about you, not about what that person is actually doing in their craft. Like, you don't like that somebody else is a Wiccan or somebody else practices some other type of tradition. Like, well, you don't get any say in what that other person is doing. So, like, what does that say about you?
Right.
Correct.
Well, this is a good question I want to bring up. Oh, not this one. This one right here. What is your thoughts on that, Thorn? Because Justin and I have talked about that till we're blue in the face. So we kind of wanted to know what your thought was. And I'm glad that Jolie brought it up, because that's something I want to touch on, because eclecticism brings in other traditions and other cultures.
The thing, though, about that's true. But one of the things that I think is a pitfall that we don't discuss is that the solution to the problems of cultural appropriation is not to not be eclectic, because cultural appropriation is also a problem for people who belong to traditions. People who belong to established traditions, who have labels, also are guilty of cultural appropriation, etc. Like, this is a collective problem.
Right.
It's not like again, like I'll use my own tradition as an example here. It's very popular right now to throw Wicca under the bus because, well, Wicca is all culturally appropriated. It's all garbage, blah, 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 blah. And people will like list off this litany of things, whether or not Wiccans actually do these things. And most of the time they don't, everybody. Okay. Like there's like chakras, right? And like the list goes on and on, like Kundalini, blah, like the list, hoodoo, etc.
Right.
But if you go look on Instagram and you look at those hashtags, it's not like it's just Wiccans posting those things, everybody, right? Like, these are things that witchcraft communities as a whole have to wrestle with. And if you go, oh, it's only those people who are doing it, like, that's how oppressive systems maintain power, is when we think that we're not participating in them. So when we're looking at cultural appropriation, like, we have to look at our own practices. It's not just like, oh, well, I'm not an eclectic. So, and I'm not saying that that's what Jolie is saying, but I'm saying that, like, if you look on Instagram, if I look at like the hot takes on Twitter, it's real easy for folks to go, oh, well, it's just those people. It's just those people who are racist. It's just those people who are misogynist. It's just those people who are transphobic. No, it's everybody. Like, these are problems that all of us have to wrestle with. Yeah.
It's funny you even said that about transphobia, because obviously back in the day I was, I did live my life as a woman, and that was one of the things that kind of like made me feel kind of ostracized within the community back then, was identifying in that way, because I didn't really feel very welcome. But that's kind of a cliff note of that. But yeah, I don't know, the cultural appropriation thing, that's like 90% of the pie to kind of deconstruct. Like, I don't even know how you address that.
You don't, because I mean, the thing is that when we, Justin, you know this, when we started turning the page into hoodoo and incorporating that into our path, and actually, to be honest, Justin, it was you that introduced both of us to it. You're the one that stumbled across it, and we're like, hey, I found this thing. I'm reading upon this thing. I'm learning about this thing. I'm like, well, what is it? And you're like, it's hoodoo and voodoo. It's completely two different things. But I'm learning. I'm reading and soaking up everything I can read about this religion and this tradition to try to learn what it is. And I said, okay, well, let me start looking into it. So the minute I start looking into it and taking the pieces that resonated with me and putting them into my practice, I have people telling me that I can't practice hoodoo because I'm white.
I think that there is a wider conversation, and I'm not the person to tell you whether or not you can do hoodoo. Okay.
Right.
But these are conversations that are taking place. That's the thing.
But there's this idea that I think is also toxic, which is that if you don't belong to a particular tradition, you can't learn about it. And
right.
that's also where white supremacy comes from, everybody.
Yeah.
So
True.
like
True.
there's a line there, because there are ways to engage with other cultural groups that are respectful. There are ways, like if you decide that you want to practice an ATR, right? Like there are avenues that you can explore where you can study and you can learn under people who can adopt you into these traditions, right? Like at their discretion.
Right.
And that's up to them. That's their call. That's not up to other white people on the internet. Okay.
Right.
Correct.
And if the solution, like if it's inappropriate for you to even read a book about hoodoo, like we've got a problem there, because that's an argument that white supremacists and white nationalists make. Like it's unacceptable to even learn about other people's. So there's this rhetoric where at both extremes start looking the same, and that to me is what's dangerous.
True. That's true.
There's a difference between like you decide that hoodoo is interesting, so you go read hoodoo books by Black authors, okay? And you explore those communities. Maybe you support artists, right? Like you buy products from people who are like, that's how they're making their livings within these communities. Like that's one thing you could do. And that's a far cry from like, Brittany, you set up your own YouTube channel where you decide that you're the hoodoo master of the universe and you're going to sell your products.
Right.
Like that's cultural appropriation.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So like there's space here for a conversation. And I think that there is a level of nuance here that folks miss because they're afraid of doing things wrong. And I think it's great that folks are compassionate and they want to do things well. But some of the rhetoric that I'm seeing, especially on places like Twitter, it sounds an awful lot like white nationalism, frankly.
It is. And like, this is the funny thing. I want to bring up this comment that 505 Raven has put up. This is exactly what I'm talking about. And this is the funny thing. My interpretation of pulling different cultures and pulling different belief systems, we'll use hoodoo as an example because we're on it talking about it right now. I feel in my personal practice, if I do the research and honor the people that brought this to this part to the world, and go back in time and honor them and honor the ancestors and pay my respects and do it the right way with respect, I don't see a problem in bringing their traditions into my practice, as long as I'm doing it with respect. Now, if I was doing it like, and exploiting it, that's a completely different thing, or not doing my research and not honoring and respecting where it came from. I mean, the things that they had to go through to come to this part of the world is it blows. Justin and I went to New Orleans. We lived it. We saw it. We read about it. We experienced it. I mean, we went to the Ugon tree, and just to be there, the energy in that tree, and to know what happened there so many thousands of years ago is just like, so I don't think there's a problem with honoring it and respecting it if you're going to bring it into your practice,
Well,
and
I think it's all execution. Yeah, I mean that it was hundreds of years ago, but I think that it's all like, when I say that I pull hoodoo into my practice, I'm talking about what I view personally as the thin introduction, commercial value level of what people put in beginner books. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
And I think it's very different to do that rather than me coming on here saying I'm a hoodoo priest or that I practice voodoo, which I do not. But I think it's all a level, but at the same time, it's all about really honestly having an open conversation, because I do understand why people of color are hesitant, but it's a very sticky situation.
I think the first lesson there too is that we need to be elevating those voices. We need to be elevating BIPOC voices, right? Like, because when it's just white people arguing with other white people, like all of that gets lost. So like, if you're interested in learning about these other traditions, like go and support those experts who are out there. Go listen to them on podcasts. Don't listen to us, right? Like, don't come here to learn about hoodoo. Don't come here to learn about voodoo. Like, go. Right, like Lilith Dorsey just released an awesome book. Actually, her book I read for the first time when it came out on Citadel Press. The title changed. The original title was, I want to say it was called Voodoo and Afro-Caribbean Paganism, right? And that title already. But it was a great book. I read that in college, and that was the first time I'd been exposed to this tradition. And that book has been re-released. So like, go and support those authors. Yeah. Go and support those voices. Go and support those practitioners. Like, instead of coming out with these like sweeping statements about who can and can't do these things, because overwhelmingly it's white people doing that. Like, go support those voices. I was packing, and I moved recently, and I have a dream catcher that I remember my niece gave me several years ago, and it has a little tag on it, and it says that this dream catcher was manufactured in I don't remember the state, but it was manufactured on a Navajo reservation, and the purchase of this dream catcher supports 25 Native artists. Like, thank you for your purchase. And I was just thinking, like, if Twitter knew I owned a dream catcher, like, people would be mad. But like, there's a difference between like supporting Native artists. Like, go buy the beadwork, everybody. Go buy the things that these artists are selling. Don't buy them at Urban Outfitters, right? Like, don't buy them. Like, that's the problem. It's not that you're a bad person for reading about these things or having these objects. The question is where you're getting them, who's being exploited, who's profiting, who has power and who doesn't, and whose voices aren't being heard because all the white people are yelling.
Yeah, good point.
Very true.
That was kind of like a mic drop moment. It was like a...
Well, I don't know. I mean, it bothers. Well, and part of this is like me as a teacher too, like a classroom. I'm not a classroom teacher anymore, but I was for several years. I'm always concerned when people say that, well, you shouldn't read certain things. You shouldn't engage with certain texts. You shouldn't learn about certain things because it's bad for you to learn certain things.
Yeah.
Like, whatever the thing is we're talking about, like, the teacher in me goes, I don't like it when people tell me what I can't learn about or read. And like, learning about something is not the same thing as stealing it. It's not the same thing as exploiting it.
Exactly what people think. And I was actually in my studies trying to learn more about hoodoo. And it's not that I really call myself a hoodoo practitioner, because I'm really not, but there are aspects to hoodoo that I like to pull. that I believe in, that I want to bring into my practice. But I wanted to do it right by learning everything I possibly could learn to do it the right way with respect. So I was learning, and I went into YouTube and I was looking at videos of different people talking about hoodoo and voodoo and all that kind of good stuff. And I came across a video, and the first sentence that she says opening up into the video is, if you're watching this video, I mean, straight faced, right at the camera, if you're watching this video and you are white, click out, because you're not allowed to practice this. And I was like,
but I think everyone comes from a different place too. And I think that's where it comes from. Like I have found that I don't think it's any different. I want to say it's not any different, but it's not really any different from, Thorn saying don't pull from the Gardnerian tradition, and somebody else saying, well, don't pull from this. And then somebody else from the same tradition saying, oh, it's perfectly fine because I'm telling you it's fine.
Well, you can't treat these groups as monoliths. It's not like there isn't a singular Black voice. There isn't a singular queer voice. There isn't a singular Wiccan voice. And that's just kind of one of those hard things about being alive, everybody, is that there isn't going to be a clear-cut, easy way. Like, stuff is going to be hard. So, like, you have to decide with your own little brain, like, what is going to be the ethical way for you to move forward or not. Like, if you click away, if you watch the video, like, I think as long as you have an ethical justification for your choice, like, and you are okay with living with that, then there you are. Like, nobody can control you. So I don't know. It's also just really exhausting to police what other people do.
Yes. It just blew me away. Honestly, it shocked me. Yes, I watched the whole video. I didn't click out of it, but that's a side point. But it just kind of shocked me. Like, that's going to be your opening statement?
Well, think about...
The thing is, if it was me and it was my tradition from my people, I would be honored that other people of different cultures and traditions want to carry it on. That would be honoring to me.
Well, and I think as long as you understand that that's your perspective, that isn't necessarily going to be shared, right? And you can't assume that that's going to be the case, because respect is also not a monolithic thing. Respect looks like different things to different cultures and different peoples, different individuals. I think, like, I'm not going to try to speak to ATRs. Okay, that's absolutely not my place. But thinking about Wicca, so if what we mean by closed practice is something that you have to be like a member of, whether like culturally or brought into or whatever, then like Wicca is a closed practice. At least initiatory Wicca is, Gardnerian Wicca is. You can't just read a book, and I mean, like, yes, you literally could call yourself a Gardnerian Wiccan, but everybody's going to look at you with a side eye, and nobody's going to invite you to the coven meeting. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's just true. Like, I could like drive myself down to the hospital here in Huntsville and start telling people I'm a nurse, right? But that would be a problem. I wouldn't objectively be a nurse. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's going to let me like see patients. We could see how far I could get, guys. I could try this later. But at the same time, I also believe that my tradition guards itself. I don't think that our secrets, I don't think it's possible for you to find them on the internet, or for you to, like, I don't need to defend the Gardnerian tradition to anybody, because I know that it's experiential. And if you're not brought into it and trained into it, then you don't have it. I don't care if you think you have a copy of somebody's Book of Shadows that you found on Sacred Source. You don't. Like, and even if you let's say you did find some piece of like really authentic liturgy, like, reading something on the internet is not the same thing as training in a system for decades. Like, those are not comparable. So, like, you can use the words if you want to, but like, the mysteries guard themselves in my tradition. So, like, the gatekeeping really isn't even necessary, because you can see who has those experiences and who doesn't, just in interacting with folks, I think, over time.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, even when it comes to any closed religion. Like, people write books on everything, but I don't think anyone gives their secrets away, regardless of what the topic is or what the tradition is. Nobody writes because I just think regardless of what the religion is or what the spiritual practice is, so much of it is based on what you actually go through, your actual experience and actual learning. And that's not necessarily something that you just read from a paragraph.
Right. True.
So, I mean, how can you? How can, that's why when I say
so far, books are great. Don't get me wrong. I love books. I have a ton of them, but I feel that books only get you so far, and then you have to take those steps into actually doing it.
Yeah, I think that so one of the complaints that folks make, kind of regardless of tradition, is that like there's no advanced books. Like, where are all the advanced books?
There are no. And walking and doing is the advanced book.
Well, I think that the thing that distinguishes a beginner book from an advanced book or an intermediate book from an advanced book or whatever often isn't the actual text. It's your perspective engaging with the text. I'm gonna pick on Matt Oren here, Psychic Witch, right, which is a best-selling everywhere book right now, and it's great. But let's say that I get a copy of Psychic Witch, and let's just say that I flip through it and I read it, but I don't do any of the like 7 billion exercises in it. Like, what is my experience going to be? Like, am I really going to be a better witch if I just sit there and if I just read the book? Yeah, but what if over the course of several months, I start from the beginning and I engage with all of the exercises and I reflect on them and I try them over and over again? Like, isn't that going to be a richer experience? So what's different? It's not the book. We both versions of me had the same text, but there's a difference between just like flitting through a book and actually using it as a magical text and engaging with it. That's the difference.
And I think the first person, I don't even know if he's still in the show, but the first person that I saw that did that I really enjoyed, and I have his book staring at me right here, is Keldon.
Keldon.
So, this book was the first book, and this is why I'm bringing this up, because Thorn Mooney made a really, really good point, is that this book has those exercises in there that you can reflect on. And I have to say, the first time I read it twice, cover to cover. The first time I read it, I skipped through the exercises. I'm gonna admit it. Totally.
I totally do too. It's not
I was excited. I was so excited. I'm like, Keldon. I mean, Keldon's another YouTuber that we, back in the day that we were, with. So, I read it the first time, and also because he was going to be on the show too. So I'm like, I got to get through this book because I want to read it cover to cover before he's on the show. So
his next book is coming out too. He's got another one coming out.
I know. I'm so excited about it.
I know.
I'm on the show again.
I read it.
But the second time I read it, when I had some time, I was on PTO, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to reread this. I'm going to do the stuff he asked us to do in the book. Completely different experience. Mm-hmm. The second time I read it and did it was completely different from the first experience. So now him coming out with another book, I'm like, oh, hell, bitch, you coming on the show? He's like, hell yeah. But yes, I agree, Thorn. You have to do some of that work. You can't just read a book and just expect it to like poof, it's in your brain and you're all of a sudden just this smart, little witch. No, you have to do
I feel like there's been conversations about, since we're like talking about that specifically and like reading and actually your dedication to what the text is, what the exercises are, there on the other spectrum has been conversations about using the word being eclectic as just kind of like, opening the book and reading 4 pages and putting it down and feeling like, everything there is to know. And a lot of people really identifying or making that connection with people who claim to be eclectic.
That's just goofy.
It is.
That's just objectively not what that word means.
A lot of people, like I know somebody who doesn't want to say the W word in any videos.
Oh yes,
because
I know that
they're the most vicious and doesn't want to be associated with eclecticism at all.
Oh, and that's what the person I was bringing up earlier that said that they're not eclectic, but yet everything they stand for, at least on YouTube, I know that ready-made videos, pre-recorded videos don't really showcase all of who we are because they're pre-recorded. However, everything this person stood for and shared and taught in their YouTube videos is eclecticism. But yet, I don't want to be associated with Wiccans. I don't want to be associated
But I think
with
it may not be. It's probably the idea of what eclecticism is to that person, not necessarily to you, that the person doesn't want to be identified with. I'm assuming.
I just don't understand why it's so scary. Honestly, I embrace it. Like that is who I am. I'm an eclectic witch. That's everything.
That's you. And that person may feel like they're gonna isolate themselves, or they think their audience. That's just my.
They also just don't have to. You know,
right?
Like,
yeah,
exactly.
That's cool.
Exactly.
Do y'all want to? You want to? Do you want to hear a terrible secret? It's not a secret because I'm about to say it on the internet. When I go into occult bookstores and metaphysical bookstores as a whole, I very frequently, I'm not right now because I had to go through an airport and I tend to not wear jewelry when I fly, but normally I wear some kind of like pentacle jewelry. When I go into a metaphysical or occult bookshop, I take the pentagram off. And it's because people assume I'm a moron.
What?
Yeah.
I don't get that. I don't get it.
People speak differently. I mean, not all the time. I'm not saying that this is like universal. This is like everybody. But yeah, I don't advertise. It's not even just being Wiccan, but like being an insider, being a witch, because it invites conversations sometimes that I don't want to have just when I'm there to like shop for candles or something, because everybody thinks that they're a master. Like, especially people who own shops, like everybody thinks that they're just like, they know everything. And if you come in wearing a particular symbol, like they've got your number.
Okay.
We do that to each other online too. Like, I've got a Wiccan YouTube channel. Therefore, other people must know all about what I'm about. That person over there, they're a traditional witch. They're an eclectic. Like, there's so much baggage tied to every label we could possibly use, and it's exhausting, like no matter what. And sometimes when I'm just shopping for my motherfucking candles, I just want to set the baggage down. So I take off my witch jewelry.
Wow.
Is that terrible? I've done that for years.
I don't, in my everyday life, and every day, like going to work and wherever. I mean, I don't normally wear jewelry anyway, but I don't, just because I have that same feeling as far as like people asking me a million questions I don't want to answer, or people think you're some sort of weirdo. But when it comes to like going to metaphysical shops, I'm the type of person where I just always feel like the idiot, because I just kind of do my own thing, you know, in my own practice. I'm like, I only know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. And that's just how I feel about it. So I'll tell you what I know. So I'm always like we and Brittany went shopping one time, speaking of candles. And I was just like, okay, I like that. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to grab that. I like that. I'm kind of like a spontaneous shopper in all aspects of my life. I get up to the register. I put out. She goes, "Oh, so what are we conjuring today?" I said,
your mom.
Right. I'm like, I don't fucking know. The candle's purple. I thought it was pretty. I'll find something to do with it. Maybe I'll shove it up my ass. Can we not have a conversation?
Your mom's chest hair.
Right. Like, I'm like, I don't know. And like, me and
I don't want to have
together.
A conversation.
I don't. And Brittany,
here's the weird thing, though. I remember because I was behind you in line, and she said to you, she goes, she's backing your stuff up, and she goes, "So what are we conjuring up today?" And I'm sitting there going, "What the fuck?" I was like, I didn't know we were conjuring. You were staying over my house for the night, so I'm like, I didn't know we were conjuring tonight. What the fuck? What did you buy? So
and like
I don't know.
We've been together before, and like there'll be conversations, and I'm just like, I don't know. I just get in this weird place that I just like, my head just goes whoop, like into another place. I'm like, I don't really care to have this conversation. I don't know why I'm that way. I'm like, what? Crescent moon who? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't know. I just always feel like the idiot in the room. But
I think we just need to stop assuming that we understand what everybody else is up to. You know, like if somebody tells you that they're eclectic, That doesn't mean that you know them. If somebody tells you that they're Wiccan or whatever, like we use the words differently, and like we can argue all day long on Twitter whether or not that's right, but it doesn't
Right.
matter how we feel about it. That's just what people do, and they're going to keep doing it even if it makes you mad. So maybe like stop and ask somebody, well, what does that mean to you? Or like, well, I've heard that word used like this. What does it mean when you use it? Like, use that as a conversation opener instead of being like, oh, you're one of them.
Well, I mean, have you ever
Right.
gone to a grocery store and bought some tampons?
No,
have the cashier
never.
have the cashier go, well, how's your flow doing today? Like, why is that not okay at a Publix?
Has that happened to you?
What?
Do you need to talk about something?
How do we get on periods? I mean, we can talk about whatever, but shit. The reproductive system is amazing.
I'm just saying, you know, like, why is it okay at a witchy shop for them to look at the items you're buying and assume you're conjuring something? But if you buy a thing of Tampax, like, how is your flow today?
I'll tell you why.
Because you're a good salesperson.
No, I'll tell you why. It could be, yeah, but a lot of the time, those conversations, and I'm not talking about like necessarily what happened to you in that line, the conjuring, not the tampons. I don't know where you're shopping, Brittany. Maybe find someplace else. They shouldn't say that to you.
Right. How's your flow?
But a lot of the times, like when you go to like pagan meetups or festivals or whatever, when people bring that stuff up, when they seem like they're getting too personal, a lot of the time it's a power grab and it's gross, but we're kind of measuring ourselves up against each other. Like, who's the expert in the room? And I'm not saying that people do it consciously or that it's malicious, but because we're so decentralized, because so many of us don't have IRL, like witchy friends or whatever,
right.
like we don't have a good sense of like what other people's practices look like, which means that we don't know where we stand, which means that all of us, I think on some level, are kind of insecure about that stuff. So when I'm looking in your shopping basket, it's because part of me is really comparing your shopping basket to my shopping basket and thinking about like, am I doing it right? Is he doing it right? Who's doing it right? Like we're all, I think, very insecure. And I think the angriest people are often the most insecure. Just in my experience being a witch on the internet, like when people are really mad about whatever, it's because they need to spend more time practicing witchcraft themselves.
I think it's really sad that, you know, Justin and I were actually talking about this not too long ago, where he's like, my insecurity within my craft is a problem. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I constantly have this nagging thing in my head. Like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? And the thing is, the only reason you have that nagging thing in your head is because someone tried to gatekeep you. At some point in your path, someone tried to gatekeep you and tell you weren't doing things right. This is the way you're supposed to do it. Because if not, why would you constantly have that nagging in your head? This candle spell, I'm not doing it right. You know, this petition, I'm not doing it right. Well, who said that you're not doing it right? Somewhere along the line, you have it built into your head that there's a right and a wrong way to do things. But where did that start from?
I wrote a book for you, Justin. It comes out in September.
There you go.
And it's for...
I'm looking forward to it.
It's for people who are stuck and sad and secretly think they're doing it wrong and don't want anybody else to know.
There you go, Justin, right there.
You know, I'm one of those people where
I wrote it for me too. It's fine.
I like, Brittany knows this. I am one of the most like, honestly easygoing people. Like, I'm whatever. I'm doing it wrong. I'll go under fly under the radar. I don't care. Call me an idiot. I know the least. I'm fine with that. Like, I don't need any credit for anything. I'm good with that whole thing. And I kind of just was like in that point where I just like was second guessing everything. I was like, I don't know who I am in my practice. I don't know what I am. I'm attracted to, you know, the Bible still. I'm attracted to, you know, the Abrahamic God, but I'm also attracted and working and actively working and worshiping Hecate. Like, what am I? And then I just got to this point where, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just.
Hey, Justin, what if you simultaneously belonged to multiple religious traditions? Because guess what? People do that all the time. They do that all the time, and it's normal.
What's that called?
I don't. Me.
It's not, I mean, you could be multi-faith, right? Like,
yeah, I guess I was just, I just got to the point where, and it happened in New Orleans, honestly, just because there was like this sense of, I don't know, openness there. I don't know what it was, something happened there. And it just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm just to the point where fuck it. I don't care. I don't know what my label is. I don't care what my box is. I don't care where I fall. I'm just, you know what? I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm going to have my Hecate altar. I'll read from the Psalms, and I don't know what it is. I'm just going to do it. And that's, I found more confidence in just kind of just following what feels right for me, regardless
that is
of
the right way. That is your
what a book says.
Right, is doing what's right for you.
But at the same time, like I have this innate like desire on like the other end of the spectrum where I miss the structure of like organized religion at the same time. You know what I'm saying?
But you did put structure into your practice, because you more than me have a routine every single morning. And I even said to you, I'm so jealous of your morning routine because I can't do that. I don't do that.
Hey, Brittany, I wrote a book for you too. It's the same book. It's called The Witch's Path. It's for people who wish that they had routines that were meaningful and can't seem to pull their shit together.
I did, but my life seems so ridiculously chaotic that I'm like, Justin's like, oh yeah, I'm in the witch room doing my morning routine, and I'm like, bitch, what the fuck? I'm still in bed.
Maybe you don't need a morning routine. Maybe you need a lunchtime routine.
Maybe.
That could be. I mean, my life is, working. I work the third shift. I work at night now. So my night is.
No third shifter needs a morning routine.
No.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I just felt like my ancestors and like everyone was pissed at me. Like I'm not committed. Like that's how I felt like how do I go into ritual not being fully committed? Like that's how I started to feel.
Yeah.
So like I need to be committed.
What does that? I think you have to ask what that means, though. Like we have this idea. Go ahead.
I think it means like I don't know. When I think about it, it's like I don't want to just come to the altar. I don't want to just come and be asking. I want to show reverence, which I don't feel like is spiritual. It's religious in nature. Like I have that religious hole that needs to be filled. Sorry for the sexual reference, but like it does.
Hole, Justin.
I have holes that need filled. And it's like
you should make a book instead.
Yeah.
I wrote it.
I will, you know what? I'll start an OnlyFans and premium content. The Witch's Path right up the ass.
You're going to have to roll it up first.
Roll it up. Give me the paperback version when it comes out.
This is going well. This is good. This is going well. Am I self-promoting everybody? Am I doing it right?
You are. I mean, I was going to mention the book. I mean, traditional Wicca.
Now you already have an OnlyFans and it's in your ass.
I know.
I mean,
then I'll sell it when it comes out.
Okay.
I'll have you sign it before I put it in my ass, though. That way there's no like cross-contamination.
That's good.
And Vicky says, make sure you tether it.
Yeah, make sure you tether it. We don't want to lose anything. Thorn. Okay. Thorn is an author. She is a wonderful person, very intelligent. She has come to the slums to join us today. She has a book called Traditional Wicca, and she also has a book that's going to come out called The Witch's Path, which will be tethered upon release.
It's so deep you might lose it.
Exactly.
That's what she
exactly. Said. Oh my gosh. D. In the internet fame, hexing the moon. Okay. Thorn, are you on TikTok? Do you ever go on TikTok?
So I do have a TikTok account, but I had to take the app off of my phone because I can lose like whole hours. Like
Same.
My husband's the same way. I deleted it as well.
Yeah, so like I have an account. I'm Thorn the Witch, which is my handle pretty much everywhere except for Twitter. I'm Tarot Skeptic. So if you look up Thorn the Witch, and there are like 3 videos, and it's actually like a Lorena McKennitt song playing in the background while I read out loud from my Teen Witch Book of Shadows. So I was like, I don't know how TikTok works, but my understanding is that I have to basically be a troll and like put some sweet bops in the background. So am I doing it right? But really, I live on Instagram and YouTube and Patreon. I've got a Discord. That's really where I live these days is Patreon.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask about the TikTok thing because Dee brought up hexing the moon. Did you see where people were hexing the moon? Did you hear about that?
I have a lot of feelings about that. Do you want to hear all my feelings?
What the hell that is?
Yeah, go ahead, Thorn.
All right. Story time, everybody. All right. And I'm not saying, like, obviously there are multiple perspectives here, but let me tell you what I saw.
Oh God, she's opening the bottle.
Well, sometimes. Okay, so, and you have to remember at this point, like I was a classroom teacher too, like working with high schoolers. So like, I feel like I have an insight into young people that a lot of other adults sometimes don't appreciate. And I think collectively we're really, really mean. We're really shitty to teens. We're really shitty to young adults. And like, that's really crappy. So I think part of the reason why people hate on TikTok is because they really just hate teens and they really hate young adults. Yeah. And I think like that's just terrible, everybody. And I think we kind of need to keep that in mind. Like when people shit on witch talk, what you're actually doing most of the time is making fun of children. Everybody, like maybe don't do that. Okay. Agreed. So what I specifically with the hex the moon thing, what I actually saw was a bunch of anxious, scared looking adults losing their shit over something that supposedly happened, but nobody could point to original videos of actual people doing that. Only like joke videos about it. I have this theory that like Gen Z was just trolling all of the olds and like making all of like the older witches mad. 'Cause like people were just pissed, but I never saw like young people actually doing this seriously. What I saw were like scared, whiny adults who were just really mean to children. Like that's what I actually saw.
Yeah.
So like
that's all I saw. I didn't see anything else.
Maybe everybody needs to just like get another job, find something else to work on. Like clearly we're not busy enough.
Right.
Like I feel like I'm pretty busy and maybe other people need to be busy also because that was kind of ridiculous. And it's usually ridiculous. Like when people get mad about what's going on the internet, I always think to myself, wouldn't it be more fun if you just like got off the internet and did, I don't know, witchcraft?
Actual witchcraft?
Or literally anything. Would be more productive than being mean to young people. And like people were shitty to us like when we were kids on the internet. And I'm not saying that kids can't be shitty. Of course kids can be shitty. Their brains aren't done cooking. A lot of them are shitty, okay? but like the kinds of things that Brittany, you're a mom, the kids suck sometimes.
Yes, they do.
But like a lot of the things that people were saying and are saying about young people, like it's really just dismissive and terrible. And I really think that we should be supporting them and modeling something better for them. But I think that was just like a massive troll and it made a lot of people look real dumb.
I mean, it wasn't also,
I agree because
back when we were on YouTube like 15 years ago, there was some, and I specifically remember it because it was so retarded, was that...
Don't say that, Brittany.
It was that we were going to bomb...
That's ableist. Don't do that. I love you. New word.
So, bomb the moon. You remember that?
Which one?
What?
Do you remember when they were going to go bomb the moon? Do you remember?
No.
So,
I don't
like
remember that.
like 15, probably 12 to 15 years ago. I remember I was still Coconut Summer 11 on YouTube at the time. And they were going to send like a missile or a bomb to the moon to detonate, to explode a big, huge part of the moon to see if there was water underneath all those layers of crust. And there was a big, huge
teenagers
uproar.
were going to do this? I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
It was a joke. And I remember there were videos. Remember when we used to be able to do the VR?
Yes, I missed the VR.
Yeah, so there was VR after VR after VR about bombing the moon. You guys don't remember that? It was a huge thing, like back when we were on YouTube like 15 years ago.
I didn't care about the moon that much, apparently, because I don't remember it.
Everybody was so up in arms about it. It was like this big deal, and I couldn't figure out why. Like, I'm like, they're going to take a little chunk out of the moon to see if there was water underneath. Like, what's the big deal?
Oh, God. I don't remember that.
I do.
At all.
To be fair, I don't remember a lot of what happened in my 20s.
Same.
Evidently I do, because I didn't do drugs like you two. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean,
you're lost.
I didn't.
Maybe it's mine. I don't remember.
I didn't do any of that.
I was a good Christian girl.
Yeah. I was a Wiccan. We harm none. It was fine.
Harm none. That's correct.
That's how that works.
Well, you know what? I'm not imagining things because Mary doesn't remember it. Okay.
Okay. You and Mary can go have a conversation.
I'm looking down, but it's because I'm pulling up the comments because I want to see what folks are saying.
I mean, there's been a lot of interaction, and we haven't been able to kind of, like we normally do, go over and talk into, well, we usually don't do it until about 10 o'clock anyway, but there's been a lot of good conversation going on in the chat. A lot of people just putting their 2 cents in, bringing up topics. Really good conversation.
Yes, D. Enya's only time. Who can say what? I don't know the words.
I don't either, but what an angelic voice.
Only time. Hell yeah.
Oh, God.
So you were, I mean, completely different artists, but that just makes me think of the animals in cages, not trying to trigger anybody, and then the Sarah McLachlan singing. What's that song that she sings?
Animals in cages. I mean, Sarah McLachlan.
Yeah, like, what's that song
I just remember that, like, in the 90s, that was when I was really into music and getting into music, and everybody's parents were like really concerned that we were going to listen to like 9 Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson, and that was going to make us all depressed, right? Like that was going to make us depressed and whatever. And I'm like, excuse me, sir, have you heard Sarah McLachlan's Surfacing? That's why we're all sad. It's not 9 Inch Nails. It's Sarah McLachlan. Like, if you really are worried about your kids being depressed, blame her. Because I listened to Surfacing and I was just like, oh, right, building a mystery. That record is great.
I'm too busy over here building a mystery.
I'm sorry. I just like keep knocking us off course.
No, that's fine.
You're in the arms of the angel.
That's it.
May you find some comfort here. Yeah.
That's it right there. And you wake up and it's some like animal that weighs 2 pounds and it has no fur. Oh, fuck. It's so depressing.
Well, they had them in that SPCA commercial. That song.
Yes.
All right, boring. Witchcraft.
So, why do you? I don't even know what I'm about to say. Granarian witches, witchcraft, Wicca.
Oh. And good night, everybody. Yes.
So I really enjoyed your video that you did about Wicca infiltrating basically all books that pertain to witchcraft.
Yeah.
That's my statement. It was really good, really well crafted, and very interesting because I guess subconsciously I had made the connection, but I kind of just didn't pay attention to it.
Well, it's interesting because it points to sort of like what we were talking about earlier about like labels and what we mean by words. When people say that they're not interested in Wicca, or they don't like Wicca, that's not the path for them, or even that like on another extreme, like Wicca is stupid, Wicca is terrible, whatever. You have to kind of hit pause sometimes and ask what that means, because often those same people are doing really Wiccan things. They're they're using athames and casting circles, a corded circle, and they're invoking the 4 elements, and they've got like a dual goddess and god, and like you can give them different names, everybody, but like if you're standing from a distance, it still looks an awful lot like Wicca, which then raises the question of like, what do we actually mean when we say like, oh, I'm sick of Wicca, I don't like Wicca. Like, we have different understandings of what that word means. And I think it was Heather in the chat who pointed out that traditional Wicca and eclectic Wicca sometimes look like really different religions. And like that's
right.
Yes and no. I think both groups of folks at the same time, they're up to very different things, but they've also got so much in common. It really just depends on what you mean by that word.
Do you think majority of people identify Wicca I don't know how to say this, like how to articulate it. Do you think some people, when they say I don't identify with Wicca, or Wicca isn't the path for me, they're more so talking about initiation rather than the structure of Wicca?
No, I think a lot of the times when people say, this is 100% a generalization based on kind of what I'm seeing on social media right now. Okay. Oftentimes when I run into folks who say that they don't like Wicca, they're not into Wicca, whatever, they'll follow that up by saying that Wicca isn't as serious, or they don't like the read, or they're afraid of engaging in cultural appropriation. Like kind of there's like a list of things. So often I think folks don't realize that traditional Wicca even exists, or that it's different. It's not that they're skeptical about things like initiation, it's that they've heard particular things about Wicca that they think are dumb or wrong or whatever, and may or may not be true. And that's what they don't want to associate with. Like there's this general attitude, for example, that Wicca isn't serious. Like if you want to really be a witch, you've got to get beyond Wicca. And it's because there's this narrative that people tell that is both true and not true, where like, oh, well, I started studying witchcraft through Wicca, and then I learned more and I moved beyond it. And that narrative says that like Wicca is like introductory and then you grow out of it. And it's true that Wicca is a gateway for a lot of people into witchcraft. I think less so, but particularly in the 90s and into the 2000s, absolutely. I think most folks who were interested in witchcraft, they came through Wicca. But the statement that Wicca is not rigorous or not deep, that's objectively not true. So saying that like you moved beyond it, like that's true, that might be true for you personally, but that doesn't mean that people will eventually move past Wicca if only they learn enough.
Right.
Which is an extension of the narrative. And like that's where the problem is. Like if the Wicca that you practiced was unsatisfying, it's because you were practicing it unsatisfyingly. Like, and there are people out there who practice it differently where it is very satisfying. And if you're not called to practice that tradition, you know what? I'm not practicing Catholicism. Like I'm not called to be a Presbyterian.
Right.
That's fine. But that doesn't mean that Presbyterians aren't serious. Right.
That's so interesting to me, because my observation is always that Wicca is much more dedicated than being eclectic or just identifying with witchcraft. To me, like my own observation is that Wicca is more of a dedication in a religious manner rather than just on a spiritual level. That's my own interpretation.
A lot of people don't like that Wicca is pretty open about being a religious tradition. Kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning, because religion comes with a lot of baggage. It's that trauma conversation we had earlier. If you think that that's what religion does, and if that's the experience you've had, if you separate religion from spirituality, which I personally do not, but a lot of people do increasingly, then it makes sense that you wouldn't want to be associated with a religious tradition. And that's a perfectly valid choice. But that doesn't mean that religion is objectively bad. It means it's not for you, but it doesn't mean that what somebody else is practicing is wrong.
I mean, I would 100% agree with you, because I mean, for myself, I felt like for a long time, even before I came back to YouTube, my practice was very secular. There was no deity at all, like Abrahamic or otherwise. And it's kind of grown into something more religious than I actually thought it was going to be. So for myself, I was one of those people who was very much separated the religious aspect and the spiritual aspect of, okay, well, I don't need the religious part. But increasingly, as I go further down my own path, I had that desire and that need to have a religious aspect. And I honestly wasn't really expecting it. It's just kind of happened organically, but it feels more right to me, which is a surprise for myself, honestly.
Honestly, the weird thing that you say when you talk about that, Justin, when I think about, I mean, the three of us have known each other,
so weird,
years ago, for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, we spoken at Summer 11. Thorn's always been Thorn. But, you know, Justin, you were the Lucky Witch, then I Heart J. Williams. I mean, the three of us corresponded with each other 15 years ago I know for me, I don't know, Thorn, where you were in your practice at that point, but I was a baby witch. I was just stumbling upon something that opened my eyes. I had come fresh out of a divorce, and I was like, my life is getting good. I've got a great boyfriend. Things are going well, but something's missing. And it was the spiritual religion part of my life. And I stumbled across Wicca, and that's how that whole path started to unwind. But Justin, that's when I had met you. And so we're two baby witches going down this path, you know, on YouTube, a little bit off YouTube. We're doing this thing, trying to learn everything. And I think that to think back and to look at Justin and how he was 15 years ago, granted we were 15 years younger, but at the same point, where you've gone from there to where you are now, because I've watched both. I've watched you practice what you thought was going to be Wicca, then it was kind of just witchcraft in general, then it was paganism. I watched you kind of choose and trying to figure out who you were as a person, who you were, you know, spiritually, and then to watch this now, like in New Orleans, the way you lit up. I mean, because we went, I don't know, Thorn, if you know this, but we all went on vacation together. His family, my family went on vacation together to New Orleans. And when we went, to watch Justin just be like, this is my world, and come back from New Orleans and have his eyes open to a whole new world and see where he is now to where he was then. It's like, I get so giddy. It's not even my path. It's not even me. And I'm like, ooh, what are we going to do now? Like, and I don't even do the whole Bible thing in my practice. I don't incorporate the Bible, but he does. And I'm just kind of like, ooh, this is exciting. Like, I want to know, you know, I want to know all this stuff.
Who can say where where the day blows, only time.
Literally, honey, yes.
Like, yeah. So I was listening to that. I was hearing that the entire time you were telling this narrative about Justin's personal growth. It's almost like, everybody, we keep learning as we age. It's almost like our practices aren't like stagnant in one moment. It's almost like I wrote a book about that, and y'all should buy it because I'd like to buy more wine.
Well, you know, and even talking about that, like not liking the term Wicca or whatever, it's like the term paganism, like, or a pagan, like, rail against that term for whatever reason.
A lot of folks don't like that either.
It like makes me feel like icky, like, I don't like it. I don't like Brittany will come on and be like, I'm a solitary eclectic pagan witch. I'm like, okay, that's a whole fucking book. That's too much. Too many descriptives. Okay. I'm just a fat motherfucker. That's all I do. Hail Satan, whatever you want to say.
Hail Satan.
Here we go. Hail Satan, under his eye, Satan. Whatever.
Under his eye. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan. But, you know, I'm kind of like, I don't know. When people online ask me, like, I'm a witch. Oh, well, I think you're pagan. Okay, you think, however you want to identify me, you do that.
But isn't
Okay,
that
that's
beautiful?
fine. Yeah, I posted a picture of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and I like so many comments on the candle. You can't be a Catholic witch. Okay, never said I was. Never said I was Catholic.
Wait, what?
Never said that. Yeah. So that was fun. I did see one comment from the Witch's Lily Pod. She said, "So, what do you consider religious and spiritual? Is it the same, and how does that look?" For me personally, when I think of religion, and this is just my own like interpretation, I picture some sort of deity. I know that's probably not like the correct usage of the term, but when I think of religion, I think of an organized view of deity. Like that's how you connect with deity, who that deity is, like maybe their backstory. And spiritual is more of, honestly, I don't even fucking know. What is spiritual? I don't know.
So I'm gonna invoke my religious studies background here for a second.
Whoop, whoop.
Please do.
So
Educate us, mother.
and I can't really do that. Okay, so here's something that's tricky though, is sort of like how nobody owns the word witch, nobody owns the word religion. So I think that oftentimes when folks use the word secular, or they're talking about religion, like what you were saying, they're talking about deities. And that's fine. That's a perfectly valid way to define religion, but it's also a very Christian way of defining religion. It's a very like
That's
Western
true.
European way of defining religion, because I mean we think of Buddhism as being a religion most of the time, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's often atheistic in a way that a Christian would understand it, right? Like
That's true. Yeah.
so
That
like
is true.
when you say that religion is just about deities, you're excluding like world traditions, right? So there's one perspective that's very popular in religious studies where religion is said to, I'm going to get this wrong and I'm going to shame like I like how in academia is a lot like Gardnerian Wicca in the sense that you have an upline, right? Like your advisors and people who've trained you, right? I'm going to embarrass every religious studies professor I've ever had. But religious studies scholars will talk about the 4 C's, and they are creed, right? This idea that there are like statements of belief that you maintain. There's code, so like this idea of ethics, and then cult or cultus, which a cult, scary. No, that's about like action. That's about like ritual practice. And then the 4th C is community. I hope I got them all right. Religious studies majors, people, like let me know. So notice that none of that stuff is about God, like necessarily. So like you say that you're secular, and I'm you, the general you.
Right.
And like who am I? I'm a stranger on the internet. Ignore what I say, okay? But like, I'm sorry, if you're casting spells and lighting candles, like my parents are secular. They're not doing any of those things.
Right.
Right? Like if you're
Right.
like you think you have magic powers and you're doing like, is that what you think we mean when we want like secular government in the United States? Like what? Like
Right.
so like people use those words really differently. So in my mind, when you use the words religious, secular, or spiritual, or something else, that tells me more about you and your relationship with those words than anything objective about those words. So often when people use the word spiritual, what they mean is, it's something like religion, but it's individual, it's free flowing, it's flexible. Whereas we tend to see religion as being about confinement, about people telling you what to do, it's about groups versus the individual. But those are individual constructions. Those are not like objective realities about those words or how the world works, which is one of the reasons why I'm so insistent about saying that I am religious. What does it do? Imagine this scenario. Let's go back to like Brittany's tampon grocery store here for a second. Okay.
Oh, God.
And like, let's say that same cashier is like exceptionally nosy. And she asks me, I've decided it's a she, and she asks me, are you religious? What happens if I say, yes, I'm extremely religious? Like, seriously, like, what is she going to assume? She's going to assume that I go to church, that I'm like whatever.
You know what I first thought of when you said that, though? I thought of the cashier going, then why are you sticking tampons up your
But like, it says something about that person's individual relationship. It doesn't say anything objective. There's if you saw the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee, Captain Howie, the cop, is like wandering around the island being just like mystified and kind of adorable. And Christopher Lee is like, we're deeply religious people.
I remember that.
Right. And what Captain Howie is he's like, no, because religion looks like Christianity. And a lot of times, I think, for people who are using those words, they think religion has to look like Christianity. And if it doesn't look like Christianity, then Buddhism is more of a philosophy than a religion.
Yeah, I've heard that many times.
Right. Like, well, witchcraft isn't and it's because I think we have really, really narrow Western European Protestant definitions of what it means to be religious. And maybe instead of assuming that we know everything, we should research religion broadly and find out that actually it's a great big world out there and people use these words really differently.
Yeah, people's perception of them is completely different than, my idea of what hoodoo is probably different than Justin's. It's probably different than someone who's a hoodoo, priestess or whatever. My idea of things is very different than everybody else's. And that's why I hate when people always say like, the gatekeeping, you're wrong and you're wrong. You're not doing this right. Well, where's the book saying that it is and that it isn't? There isn't one. So where are you getting it from?
My idea of just religion is just, I think for me is just based, and maybe other people, it's the same thing. We're all shaped in some way by our own trauma. And my own opinion is just that so many people come to quote unquote alternative religions. I'll use those quotations very, is because, from trauma or some sort of religious whatever, scarring from your youth. I know that's from me, is just, my own experience is like getting as far away from that as I can and trying to get in touch with femininity and female power and, identifying as a feminist and getting in touch with my own power and accountability and not thinking everything is because of, this is probably not a good term to use, but some sky daddy, you hear that. That's like the new thing the kids are saying.
And like that's rude too.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? Like that's like the term that people are starting to use, but
they are using it. I've heard it. Yeah.
It's icky and I don't know.
It's
always
dismissive.
Yeah, it is dismissive, especially because like I always feel like I'm on like polar opposites of the scale. I am still so connected to that, my childlike mentality of what I actually physically felt connected to as a child. And then trying to kind of correlate that to the trauma as a teen and as an adult and moving away from that and connecting to something else. You know what I mean? And kind of like balancing fire and ice is sometimes what it feels like, if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah.
It's like trying to find resolution within yourself of, okay, well, like I've been told forever that I can't believe both of these things simultaneously.
And that's a very American Western, like that's also a very like Western Protestant thing to say. Like we don't even know, we're not even aware of like the boxes that confine us. Like we all think we're so liberated, but we're actually just kind of spewing the same sorts of things that we think that we're against.
Yeah.
And we all need to just support each other. I don't know, like our community is so little. Like we've all known each other on the internet in passing for like 15 years. Our community is tiny.
Yeah.
Like the pagan authors out there, like you can email your favorite authors. You can reach out to them on Twitter. Like they're people, your favorite YouTubers and influencers. Like we all see each other over the course of the years. Our community is tiny. Like why are we so invested in just being jerks to each other and tearing it apart? Like everybody else already thinks we're nuts. Like why are we tearing each other down There's like 12 of us. Come on. Like, you know.
Now I have to say the
I don't
community on
know.
YouTube, though, the pagan, I'm using it as an umbrella term, but the pagan community on YouTube is a lot bigger than it was 15 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
when I came back 5-6 years ago as Skittlecat Spiritual and then Palm Tree Bewitchery, but when I came back, I was like blown away at the depth of people that had come to this community from, you know, I call it the Tiptoe Chick days, because she was the era of that. She was the you know, the person of that era.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I call it that. But, you know, when you look at the Tiptoe Chick days and you compare, you know, a couple hundred to now a couple thousand, it's like, wait, what? We're now having 3K subscribers. It's really just small business. We're having 54K is like, wait, what? You know, so it's weird how the community has actually morphed. And I see all these news stories popping up all over my Facebook, like more people turning to New Age spirituality, including Wicca, paganism, blah, 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 blah. You know, you're seeing they're talking about all these people leaving the church now and seeking out not just us, but seeking out, like, you know, Buddhism or, you know, any kind of other religion besides Catholicism. And it just kind of makes me like read these articles and think like, okay, why now? You know?
Well, it's not just now. I mean, people have been kind of doing this for decades. I think that this is a movement that's been really taking hold in the last 100 years. And it's just that I think people are more aware of it. And maybe it's one of those chicken or egg things. Like, has it always been this way? And like social media is just making us look at it.
Yeah.
Or like, is social media triggering it? Because people, like, it's so much easier to have access to whatever you want at this point. These other traditions and these other groups, and you can join witchcraft schools wherever you are in the world on the internet now. Like, it's so easy.
That's true.
It is. Yeah, and you can connect to these people, and you can, in many ways, live a completely different life online than you do, you know, in your everyday face-to-face interactions with people. But I mean, going back to what Thorn was saying, I do think that, you know, I don't know if this is even the right thing to say, but like the unorganization of just like the whole community is why so many people, I think, rush to be at the top of the list of like the all-knowing voice. You know what I mean? Like, whose dick is bigger type mentality. You know what I mean?
I think it's that insecurity we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not really very productive for everybody, I don't think, but
I completely agree.
Again,
well, it being 10:32,
time to wrap it up.
An hour and a half, and the show is coming to an end. Oh my gosh.
It was fun, everybody.
So first of all, like, this has been an amazing show. Let's just put it out there. It has everybody who has joined us. Thank you so much for coming out and joining the chat with each other as well as us. And
I'm looking for the chat now.
Yeah, the chat.
Go ahead.
They were talking to each other. They were talking to us. I was trying to kind of juggle between the amazing conversation that was going on in the show and then the chat as well. But trust me, I did read through as you guys were popping up. I read through as it was popping. So I learned a lot from you guys going back and forth with each other, as I learned from Thorn and Justin. So again, like, this was Thorn, thank you so much. Like, this was such a
thank
good
you
show. Thank you so much for coming on the show with us.
I'm so excited. I completely forgot about our pagan opinions.
Oh God!
I'm gonna do it. Wait, it's my show now. So this one time, however many years ago, like 10 years ago, like 8 years ago, I was apparently on a collab channel with Justin that I completely like blocked out of my memory, and it was called Our Pagan Opinions. And you can look it up on YouTube right now. And we had weekly topics, and it lasted for about 3 days. And
literally,
it's fine. You can see me like really sweaty after roller derby practice. Please buy my book. Thank you.
So yeah, that was, I mean, it's so funny to think back because, you know, 15 years ago, the three of us were bebopping along on YouTube as little witchlings and, you know, crashed into each other.
Well,
and here we are.
Me and Brittany definitely were. That's for sure.
And we, you know, 15, 16 years later, we've come on here, and to do the show with the three of us here again is like, it's so amazing. I loved it. It was so great. So thank you guys.
I did want to say real quick, Brittany,
what?
2 people had written comments. Yes, Thorn has written a book. It is traditional Wicca. She also has another book coming out, The Witch's Path. When does that book come out? I know it's out for pre-order.
Yes. So I want to explain something to everybody too. Pre-order is really important. I know Amazon is evil, everybody, but do it anyway. It's really good for authors. Pre-order. Go to Llewellyn directly. Go to your favorite metaphysical shop. Who cares? Sometimes people think they're doing us a favor by like waiting to buy it directly, but pre-orders impact print numbers. So go pre-order it, please. If you don't, I won't be able to afford this really delicious wine anymore.
We won't be able to have her on the show anymore. Her internet will be shut off. Everything will go down. Thorn Mooney will cease to exist.
It will be your fault.
It will be your fault.
Fine. It's fine. If you're interested. Yeah, so it's called The Witch's Path and it's out September 8th, I think, is the date, but Amazon always ships early. So
it is listed on Amazon as we speak, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool beans.
It is. Well, I had a blast, I must say. I am so glad you came on. You educated us tremendously. I know you said you weren't going to, but you did. It was a fabulous time. I had so much fun. I hope come back sometime. It was a lot of fun.
Well, we have the anniversary show next month in July. We'll have been doing Wine and Witchcraft for a whole year. So we're going to have our guests on that came on the show within that year to just pop in for, 10, 20 minutes just to kind of talk briefly because there's a lot of you that have come on. So Thorn, you are invited. Well, did you know the details of when that show is? So you can come on and do your little
I'll see if I feel like it.
So
come on and say mean things to Keldon.
Perfect. That's perfect. We love a feud.
So yes, so we'll have Thorn on again in July for her little for our anniversary. There'll be gifts and prizes and all sorts of cool stuff going on. And then I have a special treat. I want to announce that August we have none other than Miss Owl Vine Green on the show.
Aww. Another YouTube long timer.
So next month is the anniversary show where we're going to have a whole bunch of guests, everybody kind of popping in for 15, 20-minute segments. And then we will have Owl Vine Green in August. So again, let's close up the show. Thank you guys for coming. And Thorn, thank you so, so much.
Praise Satan.
Yes, thank you so much. Praise Satan.
Praise Satan.
Praise Satan.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.